In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. Today's guest is someone I am so excited to speak with. He started his career in the U.S. Navy and served as an intelligence operator and analyst in the NSA in cryptology. After moving into the private sector, he started out in engineering, eventually moving into roles spanning operations, management, and sales before stepping into his current role of CEO, which is quite an impressive cross-functional career path. He's worked in multiple rapid growth scale-ups and has a depth of experience in the defense and intelligence markets. He spent the last 5 years in his current organization and is currently leading the charge as the CEO of DroneShield. Matt McCrann, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Natalie. It's great to be here.
It's really great to have you. And I have so many questions and areas I want to talk to you about. And I'd love to really start by setting the stage as we're talking about kind of driving change and innovation in an organization, to ask you, what is the biggest misconception out there you think about driving a major change in a company?
Yeah, I think the right answer is probably different for different companies. No two changes or organizational transformations quite look the same. It's definitely a dynamic initiative for sure, regardless of the company. As far as what is probably the biggest misconception is the simplicity of it, because I mean, you have to break it down and see what are the most important aspects or contributors to affecting change or having an effective change. And it's really vision and people, right? So as a leader, as a CEO or a senior manager, even, in order to have effective change, you have to focus on the vision. It has to be clear, and you have to have buy-in and adoption among your team. So I think when you break it down there, it's a little less scary when you're trying to do this big change, work change, if you focus on the important components.
Yeah. I think that is a very kind of simple but astute way to put that, and would love to drill into those two areas a bit more with you. I think starting with vision. So like, how do you think about that? How much detail do you include? Like, how do you develop the vision and make sure that you're helping your team truly understand what you intend?
Yeah. So a big part of vision is, what are you trying to accomplish, right? Where are you going? Where's the direction? And I think the best way to kind of find your North Star is start with the customer, start with your market, and work backwards. Um, Business, we're in business for a reason. It's to serve a market, right? It's to solve problems and create value for that market. So you have to start there. Then you have to do a good self-assessment of, one, what are you capable of? The team that you have, the skills that you have, how can you deliver value? What value can you deliver? And then being very clear on where you're going to fit or serve that market, and then building the organization, the systems, the processes, bringing on new team members to support and execute against that. So I think it really starts with the market, and then a self-assessment of where you can deliver the most value for that market.
Yeah. And specific to your environment, I know you've done some tremendous work in your current organization, and starting with kind of an emerging market, and then
Yes.
finding the applications for the technology, and then building out the use cases and scaling up your go to market. Can you talk about, how did you do this in the current environment where presumably there's a lot kind of continuing to change?
Yeah, we're in a very fast paced market for sure. So what and what we do, what we focus on is counter drone. So it's the detection and the analysis and then the protection aspects of from drones. So think drones, think robots. There's tons of reports coming out every week from various pockets around the world about the potential threat, the risks associated with them. It's a really fast moving field. The important thing is for us, to focus on building a team and an organization that moves quicker inside than the events and the threats move on the outside. Because that's the only way you'll stay ahead in a technology field that is just hitting kind of an exponential inflection point like we are right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think there's anything kind of unique in your mindset around like when to hire, who to hire to help make that kind of dynamic team a reality?
Yeah, there's tons of thoughts around that, right? And tons of different ways to approach it, for sure. Yeah, hiring's one of the challenges, right? In a fast moving field, you need to hire right. You need to make some key hires, and they need to be home runs. Otherwise, you just uh, gave away 6 months to the events swirling around. Um, yeah, hiring. The key thing there is hiring for aligned mission, aligned objectives. Do you want people with a high growth mindset in a high growth field? Because that ends up being or running through your culture, and your culture has to be able to adapt and move quickly in a space that adapts and moves quickly.
Yep. Uh, do you ever encounter kind of naysayers or folks that are kind of apprehensive of some of the changes, and kind of how do you manage that if so?
Yeah, I mean, we're all humans, right? Change. Everyone will say change is good, but nobody wants to really change, right? Sometimes it's difficult. I think anchoring that to what we've done here, about 6 months into my role as CEO, what we started implementing here among the team, and the team at the time was maybe 6 to 8 people. So a very small team where we could all shout down the hallway and still hear each other. But what we implemented was quarterly meetings for the purpose of really coming back, realigning on the mission of the company, also the core values and the what it ended up evolving into guiding principles for our organization. The reason that this was so important to have alignment on that and have everyone not only contribute but buy into our operating system, our DroneShield operating system, was because if everyone's on the same page, everyone knows where we're going, what we're doing, we can operate a lot more autonomously, and we can make decisions at the closest point to where that decision needs to be made, which allows us to move quickly. So going back to moving quicker inside the organization than the events in the market outside, it means empowering the team and making sure that they have the tools and the framework to be able to operate autonomously and own their area of business. This way, you remove the bottlenecks. So that was a key thing to do. And those quarterly meetings, coming together, realigning, those meetings are 4 hours sometimes. So it's a significant investment and contribution from all the team members. But it really helps everyone across the organization have that big picture, that full picture. So they understand, they have the context, they know what we're trying to do and what the team down the hallway is trying, but also why. So it helps them give them a decision lens in their own space of the business to make sure that we're all aligned and we're all running in the same direction.
Right.
Um, so quarterly has worked for us. We move very quickly, and if things start veering off or going off the rails, we can pull it back every 3 months and get realigned and feel good about where we're going and the forward momentum.
Mhm. Is there anything specific you do around that cross-functional alignment? Like, is it purely in those quarterly meetings, or are there other things to make sure that everyone knows kind of what everyone else is working on that's relevant?
Yeah, so on the quarterlies, what we do, each team, team lead and their teams discuss their goals for the quarter and reiterate their goals for the year to the rest of the team. So you have operations briefing, technology team, the tech team, the sales team, administrative team, about what they're doing, some of the challenges they have that quarter, what they learned, lessons learned, and then also what their focus is for that next quarter. And the reason we do that is so when the different functions are asking or requesting information or some support, some help, from different areas of the business, everyone understands why and can tie it back to, oh, I know what you're trying to accomplish. Yes, let me help you out. Or maybe I think I can give you a different resource that would help you get to where you want to go. So just that kind of communication. You can't ever over communicate. I think you definitely don't want to over talk, but you don't want to miss the opportunity to over communicate. And that's really reiterating what's important.
Yeah. And I think to your point, like it's can be hard to remember to communicate and think of all the details relevant to share when you are moving fast, but all that
Yeah.
much more important to do so.
Yeah, it certainly can. It definitely can. I think we have a shorthand speak here, and that's part of the culture. But that's also part of the onboarding, right? I mean, we have our own lingo, so we can talk quickly and be aligned with each other. Yeah, that served us well. It streamlines a lot of activities.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure. Matt, I want to come back to something you talked about, kind of the concept of autonomy. And
Mhm.
I'm curious, um, you know, how much do you look to hire people who are already accustomed to kind of working with that much autonomy and kind of their role or their division versus is that something that you kind of encourage and instill kind of within your organization?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's both. To be honest, we have a healthy mix. We have a strong veteran presence, so a lot of people who have served in the military and law enforcement because that's the markets we serve. So they have that ingrained nature and understand how the customer acts, how to move quickly. We have others that are come from large organizations, large corporations where there wasn't as much autonomy, and that one of the things learned as far as evaluating talent is what we spoke about a little earlier is making sure that that growth mindset is there, making sure that somebody has that personal initiative to take on more responsibilities, kind of be curious, ask those right questions. Those are people who are going to do really well in our type of environment, because we're creating that environment for them to take on opportunities to self-direct a little bit of their not only their career but the next set of responsibilities that they take on. So having that growth mindset, eager to learn, eager to understand, allows us to provide them opportunities and work that maybe is outside of their job description. Maybe it's a little adjacent to what they're doing now, but it allows them the opportunity to grow themselves and contribute to the team. And you know, you want to support, you want to coach to make sure they have what they need. But at the end of the day, when the ownership is not only on the responsibility but the result, those people will shine.
Yeah, I love that you said that. I too am a big proponent of growth mindset for myself and in our organization. And I always think of kind of the word yet is the one that you need to add whenever you might have something a bit negative to say, right? I don't know how we're going to do that yet. And
Yeah,
just
that's good.
yeah. Well, we know where I really crystallized on that is my son. I think when he was in kindergarten or first grade, they were teaching that actually in the school curriculum, and he came home talking about growth mindset, and they did such a nice job, like bringing it down to that age group. But that's certainly not something I learned when I was in school, and so I love that that's like
Yeah.
being instilled in kids from such a young age.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, I definitely, there was no course on that when I went through school.
Nope, nope. Um, Another area I wanna ask you about, Matt. You talked about what the team was like when you were at kind of 6 to 8 people and kind of just getting started. I know you've grown significantly over the years. Can you talk about some of those kind of key inflection points from kind of a team growth standpoint and kind of what that's looked like for you, especially like managing through that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's a recent development for us. So the US company here, we're a global company. We do have a parent company internationally. And the team as a whole on both within both entities has grown significantly. We are at about 23 in the US now, the team that I lead, and we are about 240 globally now. So rewind a year ago, we were probably two-thirds of that. So it's been a lot of growth recently. Um, yeah, there are a lot of lessons learned. The systems, internal systems, and processes and communication chains. Communication is, I don't want to say this generally, but for us, is the first bottleneck, first thing to start breaking down. Because if you look at collaboration as like a bridge where you have one person on this side, you're on this side, and you have a colleague on the other, when you start adding more people and more cross-functional aspects to it, those bridges, they have to be reestablished and redefined as far as who's on the other end. Communication was something that we focused on early. That's why I said you can never really over communicate, especially in times of change. There's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of questioning. Maybe people buy in at different times as well. You can brief at a quarterly and say, "Here's where we're going. We're going to march up this hill." And you have some people who get it, and they're like, "Yeah, let's do it." And then you have others. Well, should we? Shouldn't we maybe look at this hill over here? So reiterating and communication is key during any kind of major change or transformation or scaling.
Well, I think another area you've touched on here around the team growth is kind of the U.S. entity versus the global entity. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that. Like, is there any kind of differences in the culture of the organization as a whole compared to the U.S. and kind of what does that look like given the U.S. has become such a big market for you?
Yeah, so the US is the biggest market for our company globally, and a primary focus, obviously, for the team that uh, lives and works here. Our parent company is Australian based. They're based in Sydney, Australia. So culturally, as far as geographically, cultures are very closely aligned. When looking at it from a US entity perspective, you really couldn't find a better or more closely aligned culture than Australia. However, different functions of the business are broken up in across the two companies. So I think more of the challenges come with the functions of the business, where you have sales and customer support in one area, one time zone, one region, and you may have development, back end engineering, some manufacturing on the other side of the world. So you not only have the time zone challenges, you have the point of view and the mindset challenges of just different ways of thinking, right? From engineers to sales to operations.
Hmm. Yeah. Are there any differences in kind of customer types or customer requirements across the different geographies that impact kind of what you need to do in the different regions?
Yeah, slight differences, but there's a lot of similarities, more similarities than differences. When Our primary focus has been defense, federal agencies, law enforcement, and critical infrastructure. And a special operations community in the U.S. There's going to be a lot of similarities to one in Europe or one of the NATO countries. There are also airports, right? Airports, if you're looking at that from critical infrastructure and how to protect that, very similar in the U.S. towards other regions. The regulations may be different, the use of our technology, our solutions. There may be extra hurdles on one side of the world than the other. Um, but from a technology development standpoint and how to our approach to customer, it's very similar.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you talk about or think about that approach to the customer? I know the business is kind of matured a lot over the years that you've been involved. How do you think through kind of which customer requirements to listen to, when to kind of look at different markets? I guess kind of asking more about the go to market side of your company's growth.
Yeah, that's a big part of not only setting the vision, but also finding from a younger company perspective, finding that product market fit. Um, I mean, you could chase a lot of different markets because it all sounds like they could use our technology. They might need something like this, but you have to kind of make a determination, decide who you serve, who are you in business to serve, and then build the organization to support that customer the best you can. And that can also be an extreme competitive advantage when you're built for, say 2 or 3 markets total. Like that's who we serve, and we are going to be the best at not only delivery and understanding their requirements, but customer service and support afterwards, as opposed to, we're chasing everybody who has a drone problem. That is now becoming almost everyone. So, you have to understand where you sit, and we decided early on, that it would be, military, who had the most mature requirements in our space, and we were, most intimately familiar with how they operate, some of the challenges that they have, and some of the federal agencies, and even state level government, that operate or have similar challenges and similar use cases.
Mhm.
And we built from there.
That sounds really smart. Like you just mentioned, like having the most mature requirements and you knew the market was kind of a combination that you knew you were kind of well suited to serve.
Yeah, yeah, but it's not like, we didn't have a crystal ball, and we're to be fair, we're not that smart. We didn't know that on the onset. So you have to explore, you have to validate, you have to ask really good questions, of your customers, of the markets, and really understand, where you can fit and add the most value and what makes sense from a business standpoint.
Yeah. Can you talk
So
a little bit more about that? I know that's something that early stage companies are always looking at, and how do other organizations do it? And like who was involved in the organization? Who is the one kind of being sure you're asking the right questions? Talk a little bit through that, please.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't want to segment companies into 2 buckets, but if you could, and if you force me to, there'd be those before strong product market fit and those on the other side of strong product market fit, because you operate completely differently once you're on the other side, and know who that customer is. Things really start speeding up. Whereas, prior to, it's a lot like we were just talking about, more exploratory, more information gathering, and you're really looking for data points to assess, as opposed to knowing and being able to set and execute on your plan. So yeah, I mean, product market fit, you have to get close again, going back to the customer. Start with the customer, identify who is your customer, and your product may not be what they need right now. But if that is your business and that is your market, you stay very close to them. You stay in front of them, on the side of them, or at the same table, wherever they'll let you sit. You stay with them, and you're genuinely curious and looking to apply the resources of your company, your business to solve their problems. And you're looking for that overlap. And if you're committed to it, you will, and you're able to adapt, pivot, or develop quickly. You will close that gap. And once you do, if you do it right, you have a customer for life that will keep you in the know on future requirements or challenges that they're having. And challenges that your customers have is opportunities for you to problem solve. So the more you can do that together with your customer, your market, the better shape your company and your growth prospects will be.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really tremendous insight. So thank you for sharing that. And I can see where just having that mindset, like for me, like your leadership and the organization has really helped you guys become kind of the pioneers and leaders that you are in this space. I'm curious, like on that vein, like are there other things that you've done as an organization that really help you in that kind of market leadership role?
Clear messaging. Again, starting with customer. What is it that they're talking about? What is it that they're concerned about? Need to hear, need to understand, and then communicating that. So now, you're kind of taking a step back with the insights and knowledge that you've gained from, leaning forward into a market. And now you can talk to that broader market. Realistically, you want to meet the early adopters in your market. That's where you want to start. They're the ones that are most uh, open to trying new technologies, maybe are more interested in solutions or services that meet 70, 80% of their need, but aren't like a cookie cutter or turnkey type solution yet. But those are the ones, if they're the leaders in their space and they're the most uh, open to adopting early technologies, they'll help, and they may at least validate your business model, that validate your product or service, and give you enough early revenue to keep you afloat to continue to build until that product is mature enough where you can address the broader market, which is not maybe more risk averse or may not be as willing to try in experimental technology, but in the working with your early adopters, you have now past performance and you now have a validated product and use case.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that you brought up bit of messaging as an important part of that. And you're definitely preaching to the choir as far as starting with the customer. And I think
So,
naturally for technology companies, and when you do have kind of a unique or disruptive technology, it can be so easy and the temptation to focus on the technology and kind of all the great things that it can do. But oftentimes that's kind of at the expense of starting with the customer needs and what are their pain points and what does their kind of reality look like that you are trying to kind of help address. And I think it can be really easy to kind of miss the forest through the trees in that regard. And so it sounds like you guys have really kind of kept yourself very focused on make it all about the customer.
yeah, again, I won't say we didn't make that mistake initially. I think a lot of tech companies do that. They start with the tech, and the difference between a cool project and a valuable business is the product market fit. So it's okay to start with tech, but you do have to make that shift in mindset once your tech is once you can show it to somebody in whatever state, is when you should be exploring the product market fit and working with those, identifying and then working with those early adopters.
Yeah. Yeah. Very well said. As we're inching towards kind of the marketing realm, I know you recently brought on your first marketing leader. So I'm curious,
Yes.
ask a little bit like what went into that decision, kind of who to hire, what was the right timing to hire, like how are you thinking about that role? I know it's kind of a critical one.
Yes. Yes. And you had the opportunity to meet Edith, and she's been doing great work. We So it starts with the customer again. I'll keep saying it, over communicating it. Um, And once you know that customer, now it's time to speak intelligently to that customer and then customers like those customers. And that's really where marketing is, throwing gasoline on that fire, which is good. So we have strong customer relationships. Now we're trying to get the word out there to others that we can support within those markets and then adjacent markets. And marketing is key for that. We refine our points. We talk a little cleaner, a little clearer, and we really understand the pain points and speak to the solution for those pain points. All of that's there, but marketing, if you do it well, makes it very clear for everybody. And it's important to meet different customers where they are. Some are have been looking at the same problem for years and are very knowledgeable and can teach us. There's others that are seeing this problem for the first time or have been tasked by people in their organization, their leadership, to go solve this problem. We don't really know, but it's something we need to address. And often the first step for customers like that is a Google search on like who's doing this in this space or who solves problems or has solutions like this. And then they'll reach out. And then that's more of an education level. You're meeting them at that. Okay, where are you? What are you seeing? What are you hoping to accomplish? And then here we can share with you what we understand about similar use cases, similar problems, and what maybe other customers have done to address that in their organization. But our marketing is the tool that allows you to have those intelligent conversations and add value at that level.
Mhm. Yeah. I like the terminology you use, right? Adding more gasoline to the fire, right? So you've taken something great and that has been successful for you. And now how do you amplify it? How do you refine it? And then really move into that kind of scale, further kind of scale mode.
Well, and I'm actually curious, maybe you have some examples here, but I've seen some instances where you see companies maybe start heavy on the marketing side before they have some of that figured out, and even before they know who their customer is. And I mean, that to me that's almost um, it causes panic because you're going to create, more work discussions and all this stuff that maybe aren't relevant to your core, aren't aligned with your core objectives or uh, business or market. But I'm sure there's arguments to be made that you start with marketing and do a wide net and kind of market to several different types of end users, and then you use that almost as part of your validation and your vetting phase. I'm just curious. You have more marketing experience than I do, so you've been at it for several years. So have you seen that, or do you have I guess um, advice or best practices for like a leader who's looking at when to make the decision to bring in marketing? Because it's something we've considered for years.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a great question. And, just like many business decisions, there's no like one right or wrong kind of answer, and it's very organization specific. I was actually in a discussion yesterday that was pretty interesting. Right. Like marketing for a differentiated solution looks very different than if someone is kind of in a sea of competition and they don't have a great sense of kind of how to set themselves apart, what sets themselves apart. So I think where you guys are, have really focused on what is your unique value to the market and how can you support um, your customers. And now you're in that mode of kind of how do we amplify that? That's a great place to be. I think when organizations are in a very competitive space um, and they need to figure out how to set themselves apart, sometimes it's a bit of kind of product or solution development and refinement through kind of some of the marketing disciplines. So looking at kind of what else is happening in that competitive landscape, and we can't just say it's only our people and our process that makes us better, right? There needs to be more to it than that. And so if the answer is there isn't much that sets us apart, you can try to kind of have marketing and sales kind of push uphill to get the word out, but that's a very expensive proposition. What's more is kind of having marketing and the marketing skill set like along for the journey of, well, what can we bring to our solution, whether that's in the product, in the delivery, and right the pricing, like all kinds of ways to like levers to look at of how you truly bring something unique to the market and kind of find your niche between kind of who you serve, what you do for them, and how is it different than everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes total sense. Differentiators are key. Sales, marketing, it's a different game you're playing if you don't have clear differentiators. So yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think similarly, like I know you have kind of spent time in kind of the sales and business development function. So even though you're kind of a sophisticated technology company, kind of that mindset of always thinking about the customer and the market and who do we serve, like you were able to get as far as you were without marketing because you had that mindset internally, even if you didn't have maybe the formal kind of marketing skill set. I think organizations that don't have that internal discipline, like there are things you can, whether you're bringing in a marketer internally or working with an outside person or firm, like going through that market analysis and where all the
Mhm.
places we could play and which of those markets are growing and shrinking and where can we bring the most unique value. You can kind of make some kind of educated hypotheses about which markets to focus on. You can do some early market testing campaigns. So when you're still in that like early product market fit,
Mhm.
um, there are ways to kind of bring that discipline internally um, to accelerate the process.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I want to shift gears a bit and ask a little bit more, Matt, about like what you're focused on currently. Can you talk about something that you're kind of most passionate or most excited about from your current efforts?
Yeah. So we have we're on the tail end of a major scaling initiative due to our success in over the last couple of years. The demand has increased significantly. So teams of 10, 20, 30. You need to have a huge shift not only in mindset but resourcing, infrastructure to serve a much larger market when you become essentially a category leader. That's a huge job. Um, so for the last I'd say year or so, it's been for me personally, it's been a lot of internal focus and trying to set some of the objectives where we want to go, what we want to be able to accomplish, and by that I mean, you know, at at what volume, right? We were doing prototyping and proof of concepts and, small initial batch orders. Manufacturing was very limited manufacturing runs. When you all of a sudden need a 10 or 15x that, well, you need to be thinking completely different. So we got ahead of that a little bit, and it goes back to the vision aspect where when we were, say a $3 million company, we were already saying some of the processes that we're changing now, some of the things that some of the tools and the systems we're looking when we're evaluating those, put them through the lens of what if this was 10x? So what if the volume coming in was 10x, the number of customers was 10x? What if, the amount of support inquiries or inbound leads was 10x? What if we're going to make a change that supports that? Because we realized that we were in a rapidly growing field and there could be one or two inflection points where all of a sudden the game changes and it's like, well, we're flooded. And we never wanted to kind of drowned in our own success. That's a terrible, terrible feeling because it's like, we could have. But so we did some forward thinking for sure, and planned for the success and baby steps, right? You don't want to put yourself out there and hire 400 people because hey, 10x without 10x. But some of the littler decisions, some of the smaller decisions, like what systems to use for operations, how we're communicating, If there's all of a sudden 10 extra people on the team, what used to be you could meet with operations, tech, and sales in a single room with 4 people. Well, that's a lot different when each of those teams is 10 people. So just being cognizant of that and implementing those changes wherever we could, those 1% changes that accounted for larger growth was huge. Now we're coming to the tail end of that. So it's more, and this ties back into our marketing discussion. It's more, how do we make sure we solidify our position as this new category leader? How do we make sure that when customers who are more frequently thinking counter drone or asking about what are we doing about these drone problems or these unmanned systems, we're the first ones they think about. We're the first ones who are like, you need to talk to that team over there. So now it's really building on the success and solidifying our foundation, both internally and externally, and then getting the word out there about the good work that we're doing. I mean, our team impresses me so much. How they like just I'm shocked every day. I'm like, wow, that's a great idea. Oh, it's already implemented. Oh, we've been doing it for 2 weeks. That's amazing. So how do we focus on a lot of the good work happening here, and then also a lot of the value being delivered to our customers? And how do we get that word out? So from my standpoint now, with systems in place internally, I look externally a little bit more again, like I did in the earlier days, and focus on bringing attention and recognition and to the team and the work being done here.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Well, it must be a very, kind of rewarding feeling to be at that point, and you've just kind of shored up all the things that have got you to here and now preparing for what's next, and I think, being that category leader and, having that, it's an exciting place to be, and then you can start to really think about, like, that thought leadership, as you say, to solidify your position in the market, right? Starting to talk to kind of industry analysts, putting that thought leadership out there so that those in your target market can truly benefit from it, and telling your customers success stories so that others in the market can benefit, and focusing on your brand and not only kind of chasing the demand gen and the lead generation, which is important, but there is also that kind of brand component, and who do you partner with and which industry events do you go to or think about hosting. And, I think it is a very exciting place to be.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. It makes me think though that one thing that's important for maybe for the audience here, for your listeners, when we talk about change, we have to understand that that means you too. The role of the leader and the focus of the leader will need to change as well and need to evolve. Because I mean, at the end of the day, companies are they're ideas. It's not a living, breathing thing. It's an entity that represents um, uh, a group of people who have come together and collectively said, we want to go tackle this goal together. So when we talk about high growth companies, when we talk about transformation within companies, we're really talking about people within that company. Hyper growth companies are because internally your team, there's a significant amount of individuals that are collectively growing at a hyper scale. And the company is just a reflection of that. So we have to keep that in mind. That means the leader too. We have a part of our culture that has evolved over time is that growth mindset that we both subscribe to. And the one of the mantras that we have here is that in 6 months we should be significantly better at what we're doing today, and in 12 months we should be able to look back at this day right now and be a little embarrassed about where we were. So,
Love that.
and that's not because we're bad at what we do or we don't know what we're talking about. It's just, we expect that type of growth and evolution, in those 12 months. And as a leader, you have to think about that in the sense that if there's that much growth, I'm not doing the same thing that I'm doing today in 12 months. So be looking out on the horizon as far as where you need to grow and lean forward for your team's perspective, because at some point in time, you make that transition where it's like team enablement as opposed to, running full speed in one direction just to get it done, roll up sleeves. And once your team is better at that than you, like it starts becoming, you need to create an environment where your team can do their best work and feedback loops and communication systems that allow for all that cross sharing of lessons learned so everyone can grow. So I know that was a bit of a tangent, but I think it was important to mention that leaders have to realize that you're going to grow maybe the most. So what you're doing today, if you're doing it right, it's not the same in 12 months.
Yeah, I am so glad you brought that up. I think it's such an important point and not one that always gets talked about. I would say, it's something that I'm going through myself now. And I think these changes can be driven purely by growth, but they can also be driven by kind of external like market disruptions and changes and things like that, that you kind of, have to ask yourself, like right now for myself with the changes with generative AI and where technology is headed, like marketing is fundamentally changing and we're just at the very beginning of it. So, right, how to work with the team differently, how to empower the team, but more so is how to push myself to think differently. And then that also requires then leading the team differently.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
to your
definitely.
point, like that does like dovetail with the growth mindset. And I think the humbleness to know that, whatever got me here is not what's going to get me and the team and the organization to kind of where we could be.
Yeah. Well, you already got the most important part, right? I mean, you understand that, and sometimes that's hard to see. So I think you're on the right path for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that line about you might feel a little embarrassed and that's a good thing. Like that's the
Yeah.
one that I'm gonna take away from this conversation. So thank you for that. Matt, great segue. Like I'd love before we close up the conversation to ask you maybe a bit more of an introspective question. So thinking about, your own leadership, knowing what you know now, like what advice would you have given your younger self in your first ever leadership role?
Um, yeah, there's probably like a book of advice that I would have to write down for my younger self. I think probably a main theme would be um, there's zero chance of being perfect. So get the important things right and stay focused on those. If you as a even from a junior manager perspective, first time manager, all the way to a leader of an organization, if you're focused on doing the right things for the right reasons, and you maximize the resources around you to accomplish that, um, there's gonna every industry is different, every company is different, every initiative creates new challenges and opportunities. So it's hard to give fixed advice, but if you have a good vision, you have a good North Star, you know what you want to do, you're doing the right thing, right reason, and you're committed to making the best decisions possible for your team and your customers, you're going to be all right. You're going to learn a lot, you're going to figure out a lot, but you won't make any irreversible mistakes. So I think that that's probably a high level and maybe a cop out, but I don't think you could go wrong with that.
Yeah, yeah, I do love that. And I think that's very impactful. So a great place to wrap up the discussion. Matt, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, I probably LinkedIn. We have a pretty good presence. DroneShield is very active there. I'm active personally on there. Yeah, happy to connect with like minded people trying to do big things. And help if I can.
Perfect, perfect. So Matt McCrann, you can look him up on LinkedIn. Company is droneshield.com. Thank you, Matt. Like this has been a really fantastic conversation. I know I personally learned a lot, and I know our listeners did as well.
Awesome. I appreciate the opportunity, Natalie, and this was a great discussion for me too. So thank you for the invitation.
Great to have you. And so if today's episode gave you, our listeners, any valuable insights, and I am totally sure that it did. Please share this with someone. We all know that spreading this kind of knowledge and information really helps all of us grow as leaders and equips us to drive successful innovation and transformation in our organization. So thanks again, Matt. And this has been another great episode of Shift and Thrive. See you all next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.